All right, now I want to talk about, for Lab Practical 2, the fungi. And we'll start with Zygomycota. That's the division or phylum. It's the same thing, just in botany and mushrooms, or botany and fungal studies, they call it division, but it's the same thing as a phylum. Zygomycota, then go to Ascomycota, Basidiomycota. Then we'll talk about the lichen, the mutualistic relationship between fungus and an alga or cyanobacterium. So the first organism we have is called Rhizopus stolonifer. So Rhizopus stolonifer, it has these structures. So this is going to tell us what type it is, what type of fungus. And the way you tell that is through the sexual reproduction structure. So this is the zygosporangium. So that's when you're going to see a ball in between, kind of looks like it's being held in between two, these are actually hyphae. So this is the zygosporangium, the zygote's developing in there, and these are hyphae. So this is the sexual stage. So the zygote kind of tells you like, oh, it's sort of like a zygote, so that's after sexual reproduction, which tells us that the Rhizopus is a Zygomycota. It's in the Zygomycota phylum. You can also see the asexual stage. So fungi have at least the Zygomycota and the Ascomycota have a sexual and asexual stage of their life. The asexual stage here is the sporangium, which I think looks like a golf ball and a T. The T part is the hyphae, or the hypha, singular. This outer part here is going to have this is going to be the actual sporangium, and all the spores are in this little brown halo. Economically, these are black bread mold. So when you see the mold with the little black shoots sticking up, those are sporangia. So that could ruin your bread. So sexual, asexual. So that's our only zygomycete, or Zygomycota phylum. The next phylum is most of the organisms we're looking at, called Ascomycota. The first organism in Ascomycota doesn't have the ascus and all that stuff that the phylum's named after. Instead, it's just these little single cells that can reproduce by budding. See all the little buds here? So all those guys are pinching off, and they're going to, when they pinch off completely, they'll form a new yeast. So this is the Saccharomyces. Saccharomyces is baker's yeast. It would be okay for you to call it just yeast if you, if Saccharomyces is too hard. So this is an Ascomycota. Reproductive structure is budding in this case, and that means it's asexual because it's literally just splitting itself in half, or at least a part of it off. And really, when you look under the slide, sometimes they'll almost be clear, but I'll try to find you a slide with pretty good little buds. Economically, these guys are good for baking, making bread rise, when you force them to do fermentation, brewing beer and making wine, You need yeast for that. In the packet, I think it says something about yeast infections, but as far as my research goes, that's caused by a different yeast species, not Saccharomyces. That's the Candida. And that's Candida. Maybe I'll make that a bonus. The Candida causes the yeast infections. It actually lives in the vaginal lining most of the time, but every once in a while it gets a little out of control. Okay, reproductive structure, budding. Okay. This is also in Ascomycota. So it's called penicillium. So as the name suggests, economically important. It's where we get the drug penicillin. It's an antibiotic, which means it kills bacteria. But, just note that this is not penicillin. That's not the name of this. This name is penicillium. Penicillin will not be a correct answer. That is the antibiotic. This penicillium is showing us its asexual stage. In Ascomycota, the asexual stage has these two structures. The whole unit here is called the conidiophore. And I think I might have given you it as spore, but that's different. So the conidiophore is the whole thing. If you go back to your lab notes and or your drawings in your book and make sure you labeled it conidiophore. And the conidium is singular, conidia is plural, and conidiospore is another word for it. Those are the little round, they're spores, in the conidiophore. So the conidiophore is forming these conidia, or conidiospores, which will then fall off and go potentially make new fungi. So this is the asexual, the spores, which means that every spore is genetically identical. Peziza is showing us here its sexual stage. It's also an ascomycete, or Ascomycota is the phylum. But here we have the asco part. So the whole thing is the ascocarp. It's like a sac. It's what asco is, sac. So S-A-C is how I remember that. And so in this asco, or the ascus, we have these asci, it's the plural, S-C-I, or ascus is singular, A-S-C-U-S. So just like the conidiophore, the ascus is the whole thing, and then within that we have the spores, which are called ascospores. You should always see, well, if they've come out of the top, you won't see it yet or anymore. But if all the spores are there, there should be 8 of them in ascospores. 8 ascospores. Oops. And so that's the number of spores. Reproductive structure name, the ascus. The ascocarp is the whole thing if we zoomed out. And I think that's Ascomycota. So those are all our Ascomycota organisms. The only Basidiomycota we're looking at is this coprinus, which is the section through a mushroom. So it's like you took the top, the cap of the mushroom, and cut through it horizontally. This is what you'd see. That's that stalk, the stipe. looks like a stem part. And here's all the gills. So that's all the kind of looks like feathery underneath the mushroom cap. So this is a zoomed out version. We're looking at here, Basidiomycota only have sexual stages of life. They don't reproduce asexually. So this is all sexual reproduction. And what you're going to notice, the Basidiomycota have basidia, which are like these kind of club-looking things. So you have to zoom in, but these are all the basidia, and then the basidiospores are what are coming. They're on the ends of them, and then they fall off. There's actually 4 on the end, and then they fall off, and 1 more is made. But the basidiospores, 4 for each basidium. Ecologically, all these, many of these organisms are decomposers. Some are parasites, but I think the ones we've seen today are decomposers. And also this coprinus of mushrooms, generally, a lot of them can be food for humans and other organisms for that matter. So this is the sexual phase of Basidiomycota, the coprinus mushroom specimen. Our last fungal specimen is called a lichen, which is part fungus, part photosynthetic organism. So the ones we're looking at are algae. So there's a green algae that's basically been all wrapped up in a fungus. So the algae will be there, the fungus will grow around it, and then the algae will be embedded in all the hyphae. So this is all hyphae here, all together at the mycelium. So hyphae above, hyphae below. And then our little circles, so these are kind of blue-green. Some of our slides have ones that are like magenta pink, but the circles, the dark circles, those are your algae. And then the fungus is the rest of it. Thallus just means body. And the lichen, it's a mutualistic symbiotic relationship. And they are useful because they are good pollution detectors, air pollution. Like they die if there's air pollution, so that can help monitor the ecosystem, by humans at least. They are also good pioneer species. So what I mean by that is that these guys can grow on rocks. They don't really need a lot of nutrients. And so when there's a disaster like a fire, let's say, these lichens will come in and they'll start colonizing, living on the rocks. They can break down those rocks into soil, and because they are decomposer, or they have a decomposition component, and then they'll be soil that other organisms can then move into. Lichens have a top side and bottom, so you'd put your photosynthetic organism on the top side, of course, because that would be where they could capture the sunlight best. So the upper surface is going to be where your spheres are. Lichens are also what we looked at Mercer when we saw on the sticks. You see on the sticks the kind of looks like foliage almost, but it's stuck to tree branches and sticks. Those are lichens. On rocks, or concrete, when you see like the kind of orange or yellow or blue-green looking really small organism growth, those are lichens. So we see them all over the place. So there'll be a bonus of you guys identifying a lichen that's not this slide. All right, those are all our fungi.